Welcome to part 1 of abstract reasoning. Let's get started. As you can see, within set A and set B, there is a pattern between these two. Before I show you how to attempt this question, I want you to pause the video and try this yourself. If you are unable to do it or want to revise your skills, press play and keep watching the video. So in set A, we can count 2 circles, and in the same square we can count 1, 2, 3, and 4 triangles. So let's write that down on the side. Whenever you try and find a rule, try it in multiple squares to make sure that single rule doesn't apply to only one square. So in the second box we can see there is 1 circle and 2 triangles. Now, looking at the information we have gathered, let's find out a rule. So our overall will be a relationship between triangles and circles. As you can see, there is 2 times as much triangles as circles. So let's write our rule as half the amount of triangles will be equal to the number of circles. So that will be our final rule for set A. Now, let's try finding the rule for set B. Pause the video and try yourself and see if you can find out what the rule for set B is. So in the first box of set B, let's start counting how many circles and triangles there are. As you can see, there is only 1 triangle and 1 circle. Now, like I said before, compare these rules to another circle. Square. So, in the second square, we can count 1, 2, 3 circles. And we can also count 1, 2, and 3 triangles. So now, try formulating your own rule with the given information. So, my overall rule will be the number of circles will be equal to the number of triangles. So now that we have our overall rules for set A and set B, let's begin solving some questions. So as you can see in our first question, we must figure out which set this must belong to. Now, we can count 3 rectangles. However, in our rules, we wrote down that rectangles are a distractor. Remember, there might be distractors in a square to prevent you from finding the overall rule. So, since we know that the rectangles are a distractor and there are no other circles or triangles in the given square, the answer will be neither. Let's move on to the next question. Now, in this square, we can count 1, 2, 3, and 4 triangles. Now, let's count the number of circles. 1, 2. So in this square, there are 4 triangles and 2 circles. Let's see which rule this relates to. So as you can see in set A, we have similarly figured out a pattern compared to the new square. As you can see, the value and shapes are both the same as well. Therefore, your final answer will be set A. In our next square, we can count 1, 2, so 2 triangles. And we can also count 1 circle. So try find out which set this should belong to. As you can see, this should belong to set A, as there are 2 times as many circles as compared to triangles. Therefore, using our rule, we know that the final answer of this question will be set A. In the next square, we can count 1, 2, and 3 triangles. Now, count how many circles there are. 1, 2. In this question, there are 3 triangles and 2 circles. So now, let's try and relate this to the rules we found out for set A and B. As you can see, it cannot be set B as there is one more triangle compared to circle. And as for set A, there is not 2 times the amount of triangles as circles. That means it cannot be set A either, leaving neither as our final answer. In the next question, we can count 1 circle and 1 triangle. Looking at the rules, decide which set this must belong to. As you can see in set A, we do not have half the amount of triangles as circles, and in set B, they must be equal. Since we have 1 circle and 1 triangle, the answer will be set B. Now let's try a different question. Try pausing the video and finding out the pattern of these sets. Now, in set A, after analyzing it, you can see that there is a rule of symmetry. You can either have vertical symmetry or horizontal symmetry. However, this is only for the first square. To make sure, let's try it on the second square. As you can see, the second square also has vertical and horizontal symmetry. Therefore, our final rule for set A will be vertical and horizontal symmetry. Now, try pausing the video and finding out the rule for set B. For set B, we know that it must have something to do with symmetry since set A included a rule of symmetry. Remember, these sets are always relating. The rules may not be the same, but they follow similar concepts. So, since we know there is a similar rule for set B, let's find out something to do with symmetry. Looking at the first square, we can understand that there will be no vertical or horizontal symmetry. Now, there are only diagonal lines of symmetry left. Let's test them out. In the first shape, as you can see, we can have a diagonal axis of symmetry. However, not only on one side, but both diagonals. Now, let's try it on a second square to make sure our rule is correct. As you can see in the second square, the same rule applies. Therefore, our final answer for set B will be diagonal axis of symmetry. Now, keep in mind these rules and let's try some practice questions now. So now in our first question, the square belongs different shapes. Now let's try and figure out which axis of symmetry this has. This cannot have a vertical or horizontal axis of symmetry. However, it does have one axis of diagonal symmetry. Now, since this only has one diagonal axis of symmetry, and in set B we found out that the shapes each have 2 axes of symmetry. Both of these axes of symmetries were diagonals. However, as we found out in our question, there is only one diagonal axis of symmetry. Therefore, our final answer will be C. Now let's try a different question with a different approach. Now, pause the video and try finding the rules of this set by yourself. So in set A, let's count the number of shapes first. 1, 2, and 3. So in set A, the first square has 3 shapes. Now, looking at the shapes, we can see that they each intersect. So let's count how many times they intersect. 1 and 2. Now, let's write down that it has 2 intersection points. Now, remember how I said Whatever rule you find on one square must be similar to another square in the same set. Now, let's try the second square of set A. There is 1, 2 intersects, so let's take that rule. And there is 1, 2, 3 shapes. So this will be our final rule for set A. Now, try figuring out the rule for set B yourself. So, since we know that it has something to do with shapes and intersections, let's count the number of shapes. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, it has 4 shapes. Now, let's count the number of intersections. 1, 2, and 3. So, in set B, there are 3 intersections. Now, let's confirm this rule by testing it on another square of the same set. So in the second square of set B, we can count 1, 2, 3, and 4 shapes. So that rule is true. Now let's count how many intersections. 1, 2, and 3. So that means our final rule for set B will be 4 shapes and 3 intersections. Let's try this question. So now let's count how many shapes in this square. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So write down that this square has 4 shapes. Now, looking at set B, we know that this rule applies as well. So, the final answer may be set B or neither. Now, count how many intersection points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. This square has 6 intersections between the shapes. Looking at our set B, we know it must only have 3 intersects for it to follow the same rule. Therefore, it cannot be from set B. And we already know it cannot be from set A because set A only contains 3 shapes and this square contains 4 shapes. Therefore, our final answer must be neither. Now, let's try a simpler question. Try figuring out the pattern yourself in this question. So, in set A, as you can see, there is a rule that is pretty obvious in this question. Set A only includes curved shapes. As comparing it to set B, you can see that there are only straight-lined shapes. So the overall rule of set A will be curved shapes only. Like I said in set B, all edges are straight. That must mean that the overall rule of set B will be straight edged only. See how the pattern between these two sets is similar but not exactly the same. In all these questions, you will always find out that the overall rule will be similar. So let's try our first question. Which set does the following test shape belong to? As you can see, there is 2 shapes with curved edges. Now, let's write this down. Now, remembering that set A has curved only and set B has straight only shapes, let's compare this square to our answer. So, set A only has curved only, so our final answer must be set A. In the next shape, we have a square and another shape with straight edges only. Now, since it does not contain curved only shapes, this must mean that the only possible answer is either set B or neither. Now, since we know that this shape only contains straight only, set B must be our final answer. In the next test shape, we can see that there is one curved shape, and there is also two other shapes that contain straight only sides. Now, looking at our rules for set A and set B, we know that neither of them can suit this test shape because set B only contains straight only and set A contains curved only. Therefore, your final answer will be neither. Now, on to the next question. This test shape has two shapes, and we know that there is one white shape and one black shape. However, in some sets, there may always be a distractor. In this case, black colored shapes are distractors. That means we do not have to pay attention to any rules involving color. So looking back at the test shape, we know that the two shapes have two straight only sides. That must mean that it cannot be set A, but it must be set B. Therefore, your final answer will be set B. In our next question, we can see that it contains one straight-edged shape and it also contains one curved shape. Remember in the previous question how we found out that black shapes are distractors. Therefore, we do not need to pay attention to colors. Now, this question can be neither set A or set B, since set A contains curved only and set B contains straight only. Therefore, your final answer will be neither. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe to help support me. Thank you.